An old dog was abandoned by his family at a rescue station. But a tearful story happened after that when Bailey had always believed that home was forever. For 10 years he had lived in a warm, familiar world filled with belly rubs, morning walks, and the comforting sound of his owner's voice. His days were predictable but beautiful, waking up to the scent of freshly brewed coffee, waiting patiently by the door for his leash to be clipped on, and curling up by the sofa while his family laughed over their dinner. But one morning, something changed. Bailey could sense it before he even opened his eyes. The air in the house felt different. There was no morning routine, no jingling of keys signaling a walk, no gentle scratches behind his ears. Instead, the house was filled with an unfamiliar tension. Stacks of cardboard boxes lined the hallways. The furniture was slowly disappearing. The usual rhythm of the house, the one Bailey had known all his life, was falling apart. His tail wagged uncertainly as he approached his owner, Mark, but Mark barely looked at him. Instead, he was talking to someone on the phone, his voice quieter than usual. Bailey nuzzled his leg, seeking reassurance, but all he received was a distracted pat on the head. Something was wrong. Later that afternoon, Mark and his wife Sarah knelt beside Bailey, rubbing his ears the way they always did when they were about to leave the house, but this time their eyes were sad. Sarah whispered softly, "I'm so sorry, Bailey." Bailey didn't understand. They clipped a leash onto his collar, but instead of heading toward the park, they led him into the car. The drive was long, and Bailey sat quietly in the back seat, his tail curled around his body. He pressed his nose against the window, watching as the familiar streets blurred into places he had never seen before. His heart pounded. When the car finally stopped, Bailey's ears perked up, hoping they had arrived somewhere fun. A new park, maybe? But as soon as they stepped out, the smell of fear and loneliness hit him. The air was filled with the sounds of barking, whining, the distant clatter of metal gates. Bailey's paws hesitated against the cold concrete floor as they led him inside. A woman wearing a name tag approached with a sympathetic smile. She reached out to take the leash from Mark, and at that moment Bailey knew. He pulled back, pressing his body against Mark's leg, his tail tucked under his belly, his body trembled. "No, no, no," his mind screamed. Mark swallowed hard, avoiding Bailey's pleading gaze. "It's for the best, buddy," he whispered, but his voice cracked at the end. He stood up quickly, turned away and walked toward the door. Sarah followed, wiping her tears. The door shut behind them. Bailey lunged forward, but the woman held him back. He barked, whined, scratched at the door. His family was leaving. Why? Where were they going? Why wasn't he going with them? Minutes passed. The barking around him never stopped, but Bailey did. His body sank to the cold floor. His ears drooped. His tail lay still. They weren't coming back. And for the first time in his life, Bailey realized he was alone. The first night in the shelter was the longest night of Bailey's life. He lay curled up in the corner of his cage, his body pressed against the cold metal bars. The concrete floor beneath him was hard and unfamiliar, nothing like the warm, soft carpet he used to sleep on. Around him, the other dogs barked endlessly, some in excitement, others in fear. But Bailey stayed silent. He had no energy to bark, no desire to fight for attention. His food bowl sat untouched. The dry kibble smelled nothing like the homemade treats Sarah used to give him. He wasn't hungry. He just wanted to go home. Days turned into weeks. Every morning the shelter workers walked through the rows of kennels, feeding the dogs and cleaning their cages. Some dogs wagged their tails excitedly, hoping for a little affection. Others jumped against the bars, desperate to be noticed by anyone who walked past. But Bailey, he just sat there, his golden fur looking dull under the fluorescent lights, his once bright eyes filled with quiet sadness. Visitors came to the shelter every day, looking for a dog to adopt. Bailey watched as people walked past his kennel, barely sparing him a glance. "He's beautiful," someone would say. "How old is he?" another would ask. When the shelter worker replied, "He's 10, the answer was always the same. A shake of the head, a hesitant smile, and a step toward the younger, more energetic dogs. Bailey wasn't surprised anymore. He had learned the pattern. Puppies and young dogs were adopted quickly. They were playful, full of life, and easy to train. But no one wanted an old dog. No one wanted a dog with tired legs and a slow step. His cage door opened occasionally, but it was never for adoption. Sometimes the volunteers would take him outside for a short walk, but even then, Bailey didn't have the same energy as before. He walked slowly, his paws dragging slightly against the pavement. The younger dogs ran in circles, jumping and barking, excited for the little freedom they had. But Bailey just stood there, staring at the chain-link fence that separated him from the outside world. He had once belonged to a family, he had once had a home, and now he was just another dog in a shelter, waiting for something he wasn't sure would ever come. One evening, as the sun set outside the shelter's small windows, Bailey curled up on his thin blanket, sighing deeply. His body ached from lying on the hard floor. His heart ached even more. Somewhere out there, his family was living their lives without him. Somewhere out there, he was already forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, this was where his story would end. Bailey had stopped expecting anything. The days blurred into each other, morning feeding, a few moments outside, then back to his kennel. He barely lifted his head when people walked by. He had learned that hope was a dangerous thing. Every time he let himself believe that someone might take him home, they would glance at his age, shake their heads and walk away. But that day was different. It started like any other, until a new scent filled the air. Bailey's ears twitched as he picked up the smell of something soft, familiar yet unknown. He lifted his head just slightly as footsteps approached. A woman had stopped in front of his kennel. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't in a hurry, glancing from dog to dog, looking for the youngest or the cutest. She stood still, her gaze locked onto his. There was something in her eyes. Sadness, warmth, understanding. Bailey held his breath. The woman crouched down, resting her fingers against the cold metal bars. "Hey there, buddy," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but there was something else in it, something that made Bailey's heart ache. He hesitated. Was this real? Would she leave just like the others? Slowly, cautiously, he lifted himself off the ground and took a step toward her. His old joints protested, but he ignored the pain. He inched closer until his nose was just inches from her fingers. And then, he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He pressed his head against the bars. The woman smiled, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She reached through the gap, stroking his fur gently. Bailey closed his eyes just for a moment, letting himself feel it, the warmth, the kindness, the quiet promise in her touch. A shelter worker approached. "He's 10 years old," she said, as if warning the woman, as if preparing her for the rejection that always followed. But the woman didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She didn't shake her head. Instead, she said, "I want to take him home." Bailey's eyes snapped open. Had he heard that right? The worker hesitated. "Are you sure? Older dogs require more care. He's slower and he has joint issues." "I don't care," the woman interrupted. She looked at Bailey again, her voice softer this time. "He deserves a home." Bailey's heart pounded in his chest. Could this really be happening? After weeks, no months, of being overlooked, of being left behind, of believing he was too old to be loved, someone had finally chosen him. Someone had finally said, "You matter." For the first time in a long, long while, Bailey wagged his tail, and for the first time since losing his family, he felt something stir in his chest. Hope. Bailey's heart raced as the shelter worker unlocked his kennel. The door creaked open, but he hesitated. Could he trust this? Could he trust her? The woman, Emily, as he had heard the staff call her, knelt down and extended her hand. "Come on, buddy," she whispered. "Let's go home." Home. Bailey stepped forward, cautiously at first. His old legs wobbled slightly, but he didn't stop. He felt the leash slip around his neck, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't a leash of confinement. It was a leash of freedom. As they walked out of the shelter, the bright sunlight made Bailey squint. He had spent so much time under dim, artificial lights that the real world felt too big, too open. The sound of rustling leaves, the distant hum of traffic, it was overwhelming. Emily must have noticed his hesitation. She crouched beside him and gently ran her fingers through his fur. "It's okay," she murmured. "We'll take it slow." Bailey didn't know why, but something in her voice made him believe her. She led him to her car, opening the back door. He hesitated again, his tired bones uncertain. Before, he would have jumped in easily, excited for an adventure, but now his body wasn't the same. Emily didn't rush him. She placed a soft blanket on the seat, patted it, and said, "I got this just for you." Something about that small act, preparing a space for him, made Bailey's tail wag ever so slightly. He gathered his strength and climbed in, settling onto the warm fabric. It smelled clean, but also comforting, like a new beginning. The drive was quiet. The wind ruffled his fur as he gazed out the window, watching the world pass by. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. When they arrived, Emily helped him out of the car. Bailey took a deep breath, sniffing the air. It smelled peaceful. Fresh grass, flowers, the faint scent of something delicious coming from a nearby house. Emily led him inside. It wasn't a big place, but it felt warm, cozy. There was a soft dog bed waiting for him in the corner, along with a bowl of water and a few new toys. "I hope you like it," Emily said. "It's not much, but it's yours." Bailey didn't need much. He didn't need a mansion or fancy toys. He just needed this. A place where he belonged. Emily sat on the couch and patted the cushion beside her. Bailey hesitated for only a second before climbing up. He curled into a ball, resting his head on her lap. For the first time in months, he felt safe. He was home. At first, life in Emily's home felt like a dream. A soft bed, a warm blanket, gentle hands that stroked his fur every night. Bailey hadn't felt this safe in a long time. But even in the best of places, time was not something he could outrun. His body reminded him of that every day. The first morning in his new home, Bailey tried to get up, but his legs were stiff. His joints ached. His paws trembled. He had spent so much time lying on the cold, hard floor of the shelter that his muscles had weakened. Emily noticed immediately. "Easy, boy," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Let me help you." She placed her arms under his belly and lifted him gently. Bailey winced at first, unused to the touch, but he quickly relaxed as she steadied him. With her help, he managed to stand, though his legs still wobbled slightly. From that day on, Emily changed everything for him. She bought him a thicker bed, one with memory foam to support his aging joints. She switched his food to something softer, easier to chew, and full of the nutrients he needed. She even adjusted her routine just for him. Instead of long, energetic walks, they took slow strolls around the neighborhood. Instead of running in the park, they sat under the shade of a big oak tree watching life go by. Bailey loved those quiet moments. He loved the way Emily spoke to him, telling him stories about her childhood, about her mother, about the dog she had when she was little. And most of all, he loved the way she made him feel, like he still mattered. But aging wasn't just about physical struggles. Some nights, the memories of the shelter crept into Bailey's dreams. He would whimper in his sleep, his paws twitching as if he were trapped again. Emily was always there. She would wake up, come to his bed and gently stroke his fur. "You're safe now," she would whisper. "No one's leaving you again." And each time, Bailey would sigh, nuzzle into her touch, and drift back into peaceful sleep. Still, Emily knew that time was running against them. Bailey was slowing down. His once bright golden coat had more white streaks now. His steps were getting heavier, his naps longer, but no matter what, she never let him feel like a burden. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Emily sat on the porch, Bailey curled up beside her. She ran her fingers through his fur, her voice quiet but steady. "I know we don't have forever," she whispered, "but I promise, for as long as we do, I'll make every moment count." Bailey closed his eyes, letting out a soft, content sigh. He believed her, and that was enough. Life had settled into a quiet, gentle rhythm. Bailey spent most of his days resting, lying on the porch while the warm afternoon sun bathed his fur. His walks were slower, his steps more measured, but he never left Emily's side. Wherever she went, he followed, even if it meant simply watching her from the corner of the living room as she worked on her laptop. But then came the night everything changed. It was late, long past midnight. The house was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, a book resting on her chest, the soft glow of a bedside lamp casting warm light over the room. Bailey lay on his bed nearby, drifting in and out of sleep. Then he heard it. A sound, faint but unfamiliar, coming from outside. A rustling noise near the back door. His ears perked up. His instincts, though dulled by age, sent a warning through his tired body. Bailey forced himself up, his joints protesting as he stood. He moved carefully toward the door, sniffing the air. Something wasn't right, and then a shadow moved. A figure creeping along the side of the house. Bailey let out a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. The shadow stopped. The intruder had clearly not expected a dog. Bailey's body ached, but adrenaline surged through him. He stepped forward, his tail stiff, his ears pinned back. He barked, deep and strong. It wasn't the bark of a scared old dog. It was the bark of a protector. Emily stirred on the couch. "Bailey!" Her voice was groggy, but she sat up quickly when she saw him standing by the door, his body tense. Then she heard it too, the shuffling outside, the faint creak of the wooden deck. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Bailey didn't take his eyes off the door. He barked again, louder this time. The figure outside hesitated, then turned and ran. Heavy footsteps pounded against the ground as the intruder fled into the night. A few minutes later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the street. The police arrived, searching the yard. They found signs of forced entry near the back door, scratches around the lock, muddy footprints leading up the steps. Bailey had stopped a break-in. Emily knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur, her eyes wet with emotion. "You saved me," she whispered. "You really saved me." Bailey didn't understand words, but he understood the warmth in her voice. He understood the way she hugged him tightly, pressing her face into his fur. He wasn't just an old dog, he was her guardian. And for the first time in a long, long while, Bailey felt something more than love. He felt proud. Bailey had always loved quiet mornings, but this one felt different. The day after the break-in, Emily couldn't stop hugging him. She had called him a hero so many times that even Bailey, who didn't understand words the way humans did, knew he had done something important. Neighbors heard about what had happened. Some came by bringing treats for Bailey, calling him a good boy and the bravest old dog. Emily even got him a new collar, one with a golden tag that read, "Bailey, my guardian." But Bailey didn't care about collars or treats. He only cared about Emily. As days passed, life returned to its usual rhythm. Emily continued their slow walks, making sure he didn't push himself too hard. She gave him extra belly rubs, cooked him warm meals, and even let him sleep on her bed some nights. But even love couldn't fight time. Bailey's body was slowing down. His legs trembled more often. His once shiny golden coat had turned almost completely white around his face. Some mornings it took all his strength just to stand up. Emily noticed. She never said it out loud, but Bailey could feel it, the sadness in her touch, the way her voice softened when she spoke to him, the way she sometimes sat beside him on the floor, resting her forehead against his. She knew. One afternoon they sat on the porch together, watching the autumn leaves fall. Bailey rested his head on Emily's lap, his eyes half closed. "I wish you could stay forever," she whispered. Bailey let out a soft sigh. He wanted to. More than anything he wanted to. That night, as Emily tucked him into his bed, she kissed his head and whispered, "I love you, Bailey. Sleep well, buddy." And Bailey, with every ounce of love in his heart, wagged his tail one last time before drifting into sleep. The next morning the world was quieter. Emily woke up early, expecting to hear the soft sound of Bailey's paws against the floor, but the house was still. She walked over to his bed, kneeling beside him. He looked peaceful, his body curled up, his breathing soft but still. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She reached out, stroking his fur gently. "Bailey?" He didn't move. A tear slipped down her cheek. She knew this day would come. She had prepared for it in her mind, told herself over and over again that it was a part of life, but nothing could prepare her for the ache in her chest. She leaned down, resting her forehead against him one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. And as she sat there, holding on to the best friend who had saved her in more ways than one, she realized something. Bailey may have left this world, but his love, that would never fade.